All right, everyone. It is March 11th, and the time is 5:51, and we're starting our March BPUB board meeting at the Annex Building. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And do I have confirmation of quorum?
Confirmed.
Quorum confirmed. We'll do a quick pledge of allegiance. Okay. I know we're all kind of trying to get, due to the delay, I'm going to change a couple of things, if it's okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for being here. I know there was a lot of activities, and some of the other board members couldn't make it either. So I'd like to entertain a motion or review for item F. Can I jump? Or do I need a, which is consent items?
I move to approve. I move to approve.
We have a motion
I second that.
and a second. Any discussions, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
one point of order. Since to consider item F, you do need to see if there are public comments
Oh,
before
okay.
doing that.
My apologies. Then I will go to item E. Are there any public comments?
No public comments.
All right. So can we redo item F?
I move to approve. the
There's a-
consent items.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Again, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. We'll also squeeze in the brief presentation, G3A. Can we skip to the, actually, we're going to, I'm sorry, we're going to remove that. So is there a motion to table 3A? Do we need to table that, Paul?
I don't think we need a
No?
table.
No. Okay.
I think we can
I don't
approve
believe
it, though.
so. You can just take it up at another time.
Okay.
Right.
And same for 3B. And I think we can move on to item 4. My apologies, that's the one I meant.
Would you like to read the item, or?
Yes, consideration and approval of the annual comprehensive financial report for the period ending September 30th.
2025, yes. So yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, so the firm of Burton, McCumber and Longoria, LLP, audited the BPB financial statements for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2025. In their opinion, the financial statements were presented fairly in all material aspects in accordance with U.S. generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, earning the BPUB an unmodified opinion, in essence, a clean opinion. Here with us today, we got Mr. Ben Pena, partner with Burton, McCumber and Longoria, who will provide the board with their communications to governance and their audit opinions and findings related to BPUB's fiscal year 2025 audit. Mr. Pena.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Good
For the
afternoon.
members of the public, my name is Ben Pena with Burton, McCumber and Longoria. With me today is Jose Diaz. He is the audit manager on the audit. We're here to present the annual audit for FY 2025. Just a couple of communications that we would like to go over with governance. The governmental accounting standards require us to communicate certain matters to the Board of Governance regarding the audit. In the current year, we had a new accounting policy that was adopted, which was GASB 101. The GASB in their always switching up things. They have a new formula for determining the compensated absence and how that is recorded. That ultimately resulted in a prior period adjustment of $843,000 in compensated absences related to mostly pensions and the FICA associated with that compensation. So you'll see within the body of the financial statements themselves a restated portion for the prior year FY 2024. Along with the other communications that we are required to communicate to the Board of Governance is the estimates embodied within the financial statements. You will see that unbilled revenue, the allowance for doubtful accounts on the collectability, depreciation on capital assets, estimated cost of capital contributions, self-insurance claims, and the pension liabilities as well are the estimates that are kind of soft numbers. They're not really hard numbers, and they require us to evaluate how those estimates are derived. Overall, the audit went well. There were no difficulties performed during the audit. There were no unrecorded misstatements noted. There were no disagreements with management, and there were no reportable financial statement findings. So pretty good audit, same as usual. So with respect to compliance, and if you have your report with you, just to highlight a couple of areas within the report, is on page 2 of the report is our opinion. It is an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That means it's a clean opinion, and we do not take any exception to the financials as they are presented. And then, towards the very back, there are two reports that are included. One is the internal control of compliance based on an audit in accordance with government auditing standards. Those requirements require us to audit the internal controls over financial reporting as they relate to your financial statements. We're pleased to report that we did not have any findings with respect to those internal controls. Not only are we required to test the validity of transactions, but we actually have to test the internal controls associated with recording those transactions. So we did not have any findings with respect to financial statements. If you turn over to page 104, this report is on compliance for each major programs that we looked at. These are federal expenditures or federal awards that were expended in the current year. This is a clean opinion with respect to the compliance requirements associated with the uniform guidance of those federal programs. So there were no issues there as well. If you turn to page 106, you'll see that we had federal expenditures of $12 million. We did audit the ARPA 21.027, which is the downtown water and wastewater federal expenditures of $7.7 million. We looked at the WaterSmart 15507 advanced metering infrastructure for $2.3 million for a total of $10 million, or 82% of all federal awards expended. Again, the compliance requirements were all met. We did not find any issues related to that testing as well. Finally, on 108 is a summary of the entire audit. You'll see a summary of the financial statements and the types of reports issued. The financial statements, as you can see there, are unmodified. You'll see all the X's as no, 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 none reported. That relates mostly to the findings on internal control over financial reporting of the financial statements and internal control over compliance on each major programs. And that pretty much sums up our report. Basically a clean opinion all the way across and no issues identified.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? Nope, all righty. Well, thank you for the presentation. I think that's it.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, this is an action item.
Okay,
So let me just read the action.
Yep.
The BPB staff recommends approving the annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2025.
do I have a motion?
I motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll squeeze in number 5, and then we'll go to the workshop, if that's okay. Item number 5, consideration and possible action to approve bid award for the supply of electrical inventory material.
Good evening,
Diane
Chair, members
Solitaire,
of the board. My name is Diane Solitaire. The purchasing department opened bids on January 15th for the supply of electrical inventory material. It was advertised in the Brownsville Herald on January 10th and 17th and posted on the PUB webpage and emailed to 13 vendors with 6 vendors responding. So there are casting of lots for 2 of the items. The first item is E011900 to KBS or Texas Electric Co-op.
KBS.
And the second item is E1214-00 to KBS or Annixter.
Annixter.
Okay, so PUB staff recommends approval of the bid award for the supply of electric inventory material to the lowest bidders meeting specifications. American Wire Group of Miami, Florida in the amount of $69,200. Annixter of San Antonio, Texas in the amount of $2,085. KBS Electric of Austin, Texas in the amount of $654,449. Texas Electric Co-op of Georgetown, Texas in the amount of $175,788. And Techline of San Antonio, Texas in the amount of $27,578.50, plus the vendors identified for casting of lots during the meeting in the amount of $8,040 for a grand total amount of $937,140.50. Any questions?
Do you have any questions or comments? Do you have a motion?
Motion?
Motion to
I
approve?
second that.
Motion to approve and second. Any discussions?
Thank
All
you.
those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll go back to item D now so we can focus on the 2026-2030 electric cost of service study and rate review.
Good afternoon. We have Mr. Grant Raven from Nugent Strategies, who is our consultant on the cost of service. So he's going to walk us through cost of service study, rate design, bill impacts, and future steps. And the feedback we get from you tonight will help us formulate another model run potentially and bring it back to you for approval at a future meeting.
Okay, so just to make sure that everyone on the board understood that, there are some feedbacks that we need to provide today so that they can complete the work. So I'll try to make sure we're clear in any feedback that's needed, and please help us if there's any questions pending. So welcome and thank you. We're excited to learn some more.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited to be here to present tonight. I appreciate it. I will make note, Scott Burnham with our firm in the Denver office is joined remotely, so he'll be available to assist in answering any questions, but also can take notes of any feedback from the board that we can take back and consider. I do have slides to go through this afternoon, but I very much would love it if you guys stop me and ask questions along the way if you have some, to make sure, don't feel the need to hold questions at all, speak up. So looking at the agenda, we're going to talk through the development of a test year, then look at the allocation of costs from that test year. We're going to look at proposed rate design to recover the costs, and then look at some bill impacts for different customer classes to kind of inform your decision making. Starting with the test year development, we started the development of the test year based on the 2025 budget. So if you'll see on the screen an excerpt from your budget, and we've just made the table a little bit larger so you can see it on the slide. We're looking at the budget indicating $199.4 million in electric revenue specifically. So keep that number in mind as we're going through the subsequent slides, just kind of keying off of that being the total budget we're working from. It's worth noting that, since fiscal year 2025 has concluded, we were able to do a bit of a post-mortem on that year to see how well that the actual expenses lined up with your expectations in the budget. And so I'm showing here on this screen the budget with the $199.4 million we were just looking at, but next to the actuals for the fiscal year. This reflects the unaudited results, but this were the actuals. You'll note that, or I want to point out that the majority of the difference between those sets of numbers is in the fuel and purchase power category. So you ended up, with less expensive fuel and purchase power, and therefore had lower FPEC, and so that's the cause of that. The rate study that that Nugen endeavored to complete is primarily looking at how to recover base costs. So the fuel and purchase power will, as it is now, continue to be a pass-through item in the rate design. We've got some recommendations with regard to how that's structured, but in terms of where the costs that are being recovered, we're mainly focused on the base rate. So the fact that fuel and purchase power is going to vary from year to year doesn't really impact that. So overall, we feel good about the basis of using the 2025 budget as the starting place for our analysis. There's a.
So would you
Go
say
ahead.
that that's helpful to project out to 2030?
Yeah, so if you'll, on this slide that we're showing here, we started from the 2025 budget. We made some adjustments, which I'll talk through here briefly in one moment, to get an adjusted 2025. And then we used some inflation factors, which I'll disclose on a future slide, to inflate those costs from fiscal year 2026 that we're in right now through fiscal year 2030 as a means of kind of assessing what our future rate needs will be for base rates. The test year is the very far right-hand column on this slide, and that is simply an average of the 5 years of fiscal year 2026 through 2030. Again, starting from the very far left-hand column, we see the $199.4 million number that matched the budget. In the adjustments column, I'm going to talk through a few of these adjustments that I think are relevant for the discussion. The first one being on the list there on the slide, $2.7 million, is really just recognizing some accounting for off-system, what is known as off-system sales, and the way that those costs for off-system sales were being accounted for in fuel and purchase power. So that's what that is. There's then $3.5 million you'll see on there as adjustment is really just moving $3.5 million from transmission-related costs to production costs. That's actually congestion costs, which when you account for that cost of congestion, it shows up in the transmission accounts, but it's really a cost that is more appropriately identified with the generation assets. The remainder of the adjustments I have a slide on to kind of speak to. Those are the two just outside of those items. I know there's a lot of numbers here, but before I leave this slide, I guess I'm going to pause and see if there are any particular questions about anything I've said so far.
Any questions or additional comments? Okay.
So the red circle around the $199.4 million is what we would refer to as a gross revenue requirement number. We're then taking some non-rate revenues for other miscellaneous charges, but also revenues that come from your interactions with the wholesale market. to create a net revenue requirement. And then we have two pass-throughs that we're proposing, three really, but we'll get to the third in a moment. An energy supply charge. This is to replace what is currently referred to as the FPEC. So it's a change in nomenclature, but the way in which we're suggesting what costs go into that, that pass-through are also slightly different from what the current practice is. And then a new pass-through charge for transmission costs, which I'll talk through a little bit more fully in a future slide. But once you take those two numbers out, you end up with a average for the test year of base revenue requirement of $93.3 million. So the bottom right-hand number. I'm just flagging that because you'll see that number repeated in future slides. So I wanted to kind of show you where that number is coming from and what it represents.
That's the 5-year average.
Right. So that is the 5-year average from fiscal year 2026 through fiscal year 2030 of base revenue requirements, which is what we're primarily concerned with when setting the base revenues.
Okay.
So just speaking to some of the other adjustments, there was an adjustment that was on the prior slide for a little less than $500,000 that related back to maintenance of electric plant, especially in your generation assets. There can be periodic maintenance that happens in those. So one year you might have a very large expense and then a lower expense in a subsequent year. You'll see that in particular in fiscal year 2022 and 2023, where you spent over $400,000 in one year and $150,000 in the next. And in 2025, it was even higher. So we took a multi-year average of that line item to try to represent kind of a year-in, year-out average for that cost. One of the other kind of major structural changes that we're suggesting in our proposal is to disaggregate and treat transmission costs a little bit more transparently. In your current accounting, when you budget for transmission-related costs, your BPUB's practice has been to net transmission costs with transmission revenues. And so in our opinion, for our purposes, that slightly obscures the true transparency of the costs and the revenues that you're dealing with. So we're proposing that those two pieces be treated separately and segregated out and not netted in the accounting. And so this slide, what this is doing, and I may refer to this in the future, so it's important, this is a representation of what I'm going to refer to as the matrix. So the Public Utilities Commission staff puts together this spreadsheet every year, and it has every TSP, which is transmission service provider, and every customer listed out on this matrix. And so the number at the very bottom under BPUB of $11.25 million, this is the revenue that we're expecting BPUB to collect from all of its customers because BPUB owns transmission assets. They are a TSP. If you didn't have any retail customers and you were just a transmission company, you'd still have this number, but the other number would be zero. So the other number is, the $18 million number, is really representing what BPUB is incurring in terms of cost from services provided by other transmission owners in ERCOT. This is the payment you're making to those transmission providers because you have customers that are using their system. That piece, that $18 million number, is what we're suggesting we peel out of base rates and put into a separate pass-through charge so that that's more transparently shown on the bill, one, but also you can more accurately represent that cost to customers based on the way that they are causing that cost to be incurred by BPUB. All the costs currently in the ERCOT market design for this are allocated to all of the customers based on the ERCOT 4CP. So that's the 4 summer months, June, July, August, and September of every year. The coincident peak for the one coincident peak hour in each of those 4 months is what's used as the basis to assign this cost responsibility to everybody in ERCOT. So we can assign the cost to your different customer classes on the same basis, meaning what is that customer class's contribution to the ERCOT 4CP so that cost responsibility is more directly linked. Before I leave that, go ahead.
Yeah, would you say that the budget process will be simpler once you separate those two things out?
It's simpler, certainly from our perspective, and for rate design, it's an important step to take. Whether or not you actually change your accounting practice is not in our purview. So we're not necessarily recommending changes your accounting practice, but for our purposes to be able to represent these two very different things differently, this disaggregates those things. Because if you didn't own any transmission assets at all, you would still have that $18 million number cost because you have customers that are using the transmission system. So one really has nothing to do with the other. I mean, they are both transmission, but the way in which you're incurring the cost of the revenues are completely different apples and oranges. So separating them out, at least for the cost of service study, makes sense. And for rate recovery and rate design makes sense. How you account for that in your accounting, not really my area.
To clarify for customers, I mean, this is a straight pass-through, basically, to us for the fact that we're, utilizing that transmission, just to get it out there, because people are going to be wondering, they're getting so much, millions, et cetera. It's a straight pass-through at the end of the day in that bill.
Yes, so the $18 million of transmission by others being not BPUB, meaning not yourself, it is the customers on your system using your system and putting load on the system is what's driving that cost, and you get assigned that by ERCOT. You have no control over it other than influencing your customers' behavior in terms of how they use the system. So and we're proposing that be in a pass-through that it's transparently put on the bill as a separate line item so that it's directly passed through and visible.
Correct.
So
Just
I
wanted
agree
to
with
put it
your
out there.
statement, yeah. Another adjustment that was in the adjustments column was related to the change in policy around TRMS. So there was, as of January of this year, there's a change in the percentage of how much the cost was put through. And basically, once annualized, it means that we added around $800,000 worth of costs related to TRMS to the test year. Because we're making changes to the test year, we are also recognizing the flow-through impacts those changes have on the general fund transfer or the transfer to the city of Brownsville. So in our adjusted column, we're taking the total gross revenue requirement as adjusted. We're subtracting out the FPEC eligible costs, which we're changing the nomenclature of that, but those are the fuel and purchase power costs. And that net number is what you multiply by 10%, and that's the gross amount of the transfer to the city. Of course, in practice, that amount is offset by the portion of the city's bill. Because the city is using electric service and they're not sending you a payment, that is netted. So this is the gross amount, the net amount you actually write them a check for and send it to them, although it's probably a transfer, not an electronic check. Is a lower number, but this is recognizing the total actual cost.
Okay.
The test year that we developed assumes $5.5 million in funding towards capital projects each year. And so this is really just laying out, looking at the 5-year capital plan and illustrating how this portion of $5.5 million of cash funding towards these capital projects fits in with the overall funding sources and uses of funds to fund the capital plan. So just some transparency there on how that looks.
So of the 199 million, it's 5.5.
So not in the budget for fiscal year 2025, it was a much larger number. It is $5.5 million in the adjusted fiscal year 2025, and then every year in our forecast, we're only asking the ratepayers to pay $5.5 million towards capital projects. that's less than what was in the budget. If I go back to the budget slide here real quick. So you'll see about the middle in there. Yeah, right, cash-funded capital expense, $16.1 million was what was in the budget, and that's kind of one of the biggest adjustments downward in our adjustments column is putting that into a year-on, year-out funding, cash funding estimate. So then one of the other adjustments was related to funding reserves. There's two specific reserves that we're suggesting be funded on an annual basis. $2 million goes towards decommissioning reserve, and then there are $1.6 million approximately for a power supply rate stabilization reserve. Here's the math of how these are developed, but I have further explanations about each reserve as desired. I don't necessarily need to delve into this too deeply if you're familiar with these two reserves, but I wanted to have something available in case there were questions about the purpose of the reserve. This is good practice from an intergenerational equity perspective to start accounting for the eventual decommissioning costs associated with generation while the plant's still running, so that the people that are getting the benefit of the plant running are also contributing towards the eventual decommissioning costs associated with that plant. And then similarly, energy supply reserve, here's the explanation for what it is and why it exists. But again, just good practice to be able to help manage the relatively volatile cost of power in the ERCOT market. And then I mentioned, we made assumptions about escalating costs into the future. There's the basis for the various categories of costs that we inflated, and where we're the source of that expectation. But I think predominantly the important assumptions are 5% per year increase in personnel costs, and then inflation based upon a chain price index. So that really is the development of the test year. So before I go to the next step, any other questions about how we arrived at the test year we developed? Great.
No questions.
So the remainder of this, of the overall process to get to a fully allocated cost of service result involves these remaining 4 steps. The first step is what we've already talked about, the development of the revenue requirement for the test year. The next step is to recognize which functions those costs are predominantly related to. So for the electric utility, it is most customary to functionalize it into 4 key functions: production, which is synonymous with generation, transmission, distribution, and then customer-related costs. So customer-related costs would include things like sending bills to customers, metering, billing, those types of activities, customer service. As we'll see in a future slide, the production costs are kind of driven off of 2 different drivers. One's variable and one's pretty fixed and doesn't vary with energy usage, and so we'll see that in a future slide. The remainder of these costs are predominantly fixed in nature. So the transmission, the distribution, the customer-related costs don't vary with the amount of energy used very much. Really, the one that varies with energy use is really the fuel and purchase power related costs. Once we classify all those costs, we can then allocate them under different methodologies to the various customer classes. And we'll have a slide on this as well. But it's basically taking all those costs and putting them to cost responsibility for each of the classes based on the way that they're using your electric system and therefore driving costs on the system. And here is another slide with a lot of numbers on it. I apologize. I'm certainly not going to go through every number unless there's a particular question, but I kind of wanted to this is a now numerical representation of the prior slide, which is really illustrating how we're getting that $93.3 million number that we were looking at in our prior slide and we're allocating it to these customer classes. Looking at the very top of the slide, production, here again, that's synonymous with generation. I mentioned it's predominantly either fixed or variable costs, predominantly fuel and purchase power costs. The fixed costs we're allocating to customers on a 12 CP basis. For the variable costs, we're using net energy for load. It's basically an energy allocator for that cost. Again, the remainder of this slide is predominantly costs that are fixed in nature. So we're allocating it predominantly on demand-related bases, depending on what the cost is, with the exception of the customer-related costs, which we're using the count of customers weighted for the size of the customer to allocate responsibility for those customer-related costs to the various customer classes. And so at the end of the day, at the bottom of the slide, you should be able to see how we're getting the base revenue requirement of $93.3 million, and we're showing that each class has a portion of that they're responsible for. And this is really a graphic representation of the prior slide. It was all in table numbers. This is kind of illustrating the same exact thing, but perhaps doing a better job of showing how the different cost groups are coming to the customer classes. And you'll see for residential, you'll see the piece of each of these functions, production, transmission, distribution, customer, that are being allocated to the residential class and then the other classes as well. And so this is, again, pretty similar answer to the prior slide, but just showing it in a different format. So as I mentioned in our prior slide, you know, the revenues from existing rates, at least for fiscal year 2025, were sufficient to recover the costs. Over time, though, our expectation is that as the cost of providing service increases, there will be an erosion in the financial performance under the existing rates. So we're recommending, you know, adjustments to those rates. We're also making some structural suggestions to changing the way the rates are designed in order to accomplish a few things, mostly in an effort to improve transparency, but also intra-class equity. So I'll talk about kind of examples of both those things in future slides. As part of this, we're also going to be moving costs, around $10 million of costs that are currently contemplated to be recovered in the FPEC. And we're moving them into base rates because the nature of those costs are such that they are more fixed in nature and belong in base rates rather than in the FPEC that they're currently sitting in. I will also note that at this time, BPUB has an over-recovery in the FPEC. And so the FPEC, and we're going to see it in future slides as well, is currently now at a rate that is artificially low because it reflects the fact that you have this over-recovery you're trying to work down over time. That does provide a great opportunity for this body to use that to help mitigate any of the rate impacts that this board body might feel would be appropriate to mitigate. As we're shifting customers to a more, what we would characterize as an improved rate design, if there are some customers that are impacted, that may be a mitigation tactic to be able to mitigate some of those impacts. We are also, for the residential class, as we'll see in a moment, purposefully phasing in the rate proposal to where they get to full cost of service by the third year of the 5-year forecast. Most of that change does happen in the first year, but it's mostly related to this $10 million we're talking about moving from FPEC into base rates. But we will have a slide that will show how that's moving over and phasing in over time.
Is there timing that you would recommend as far as in the year?
Oh, what time of year to do this?
Yeah.
That is a great question. Because this is pretty, on the whole, revenue neutral, I mean, if I was coming to you with a true rate increase where we're asking customers that as a group pay more money, I would be a little more sensitive to doing it, perhaps not in the summer months, because that's when the utility bills tend to be highest. Given that we're just rearranging where the dollars are coming from, but the same basic amount of dollars are being collected, I don't know that I'm as concerned, at least personally, with the timing of when the rates get implemented. But at the end of the day, that's at the discretion of the board.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Of course. It's a great question. So I kind of hinted at this earlier, but the intent of this rate design is to better align cost incursion with cost recovery. Who is causing the cost to be created? We want to collect that cost in a relevant fashion from those customers and do so in a transparent manner. So that customers can better understand, the impact of their use of the system on the bill that they're receiving. I alluded to this intra-class equity issue as well. One of the things that Mr. Dombrowski presented to this body last month included a recommendation to adjust the breakpoint between the non-demand commercial class and the demand commercial class. Currently, the distinction between whether a customer ends up in one class or the other is at 50 kW. Some benchmarking and looking at other MOUs and other providers in the area suggested that's a little bit of an outlier on the high end. Some are, as low as 5 or 10 kW as the breakpoint. We've kind of recommended that we move that to 25. Again, this was covered by Mr. Dombrowski, but doing that means that more customers are going to be paying demand charges. And that rate design lends itself to more equitable intra-class impacts. So the customers in that class that are paying demand charges, that are more efficient users of your system, which would show up as high load factor customers, they're going to be responsible for less of the cost as compared to what they're paying today. Correspondingly, the less efficient users of your system that are creating more costs are going to be asked to pay closer to their cost of service. There's still going to be some intra-class subsidy there, even under our proposed rates, but we're mitigating and reducing the amount of intra-class subsidy so that those high load factor customers are paying for less of the cost as compared to the low load factor customers.
Is this what's called Unity?
So we're heading towards Unity, yes. Okay. So one of the things, in our, or at least in the way that I'm going to be talking about Unity in the remainder of this presentation, is all about how well the customer class's rate recovery aligns with the cost of service. And so we are, as a group, all the customer classes are going to be at what we forecast will be Unity in the third year of our rate proposal. And I actually have a slide that'll show that, quantify that a little bit better for you. But yes, Unity as a concept is something we're striving towards. I will point out, cost of service does evolve and drift over time. So you usually don't have significant changes year to year in what the cost of service would suggest for different customer classes. But as customers evolve and change the way they're using the system, there can be movement of cost of service and cost responsibility. A good example of that is, for example, if a residential customer class, if you have a bunch of new construction going on in your area that is smaller footprint, more energy efficient, for whatever reason, using less energy than your historical housing stock, then you'll see that the cost of services kind of evolve over time because the way that your customers are using power is going to be changing over time as these new customers get added to the system. So it is a snapshot in time, and it's industry practice to attempt to recognize that as a concept, but arriving at that point won't mean that you're done forever.
Yeah.
So-
So we would arrive at that point after 3 years?
Yeah, in the third year of our forecast, as we're forecasting costs, that would be when we would suggest that you achieve unity with all your customer classes.
If you push that out to 5 years, would that impact?
Well, it would. However, I'm going to show you some bill impacts, and it is definitely in the purview of this board to suggest what it feels is appropriate gradualism in that regard.
Sure.
But the magnitude of these changes are not all that big, as we'll see in a future slide. So
Okay.
this slide, before I move on, I think is really important to just kind of show some of what we're trying to achieve in the proposed rate design. So the far left pie chart is representative of your current rate revenue. The blue wedge is your fixed costs revenues. So that's your customer charge and your demand charges for those customers that have demand charges, those two pieces. The remainder of that pie is the orange, is all revenues that come to you through variable rates, energy charges. The middle pie chart is showing you how the cost of service breaks down between fixed costs and variable costs. And you'll see most of the pie is blue. Over half of it is blue, meaning they're, at least in the short term, these are fixed costs that don't vary with energy use. So that disconnect between fixed cost recovery and the rate design is a disconnect that is going to always persist at some level, but our proposed rates reduce the amount of mismatch between fixed cost recovery and incursion. So we've got approximately a quarter of the revenue under the proposed rates would be coming through fixed charges as opposed to variable charges. So it just better aligns with, but doesn't exactly match, the cost of service. There are a myriad of very valid and good policy reasons why you wouldn't want the proposed rates to exactly mirror the cost of service in terms of fixed cost recovery. But having a better alignment does lend benefits, especially if you end up with a very mild summer with low energy consumption. You're relying upon energy sales to recover a lot of these fixed costs. If you have a mild summer and energy consumption is down, you risk under recovery more heavily under the current rates than you would under the rates that we're proposing.
Understood.
Before I leave that, any questions on that piece?
No questions.
So this slide kind of lays out the proposed rate structure. The top of the chart that's in white are the base rates, and then the green tinted bottom half of the chart are what we're referring to as pass-through rates. So I'm just going to take a moment to kind of talk about each of these. The customer charge exists today, and we're proposing to call it the same thing. It's still customer charge. And it is a fixed charge per customer connection. I guess I should back up and say these base rates are ones that you can set based upon periodic studies such as the one we just completed. So maybe every 5 years or so. Doing it sooner might be warranted if things are changing in your operations, and if you're facing a lot of uncertainty or change in the near term, then maybe you want to do this more often than that. But you might wait as long as 5 years between base rate reviews to kind of ensure alignment. Because as I suggested earlier, things do drift over time. So the customer charge, as a concept, exists the same as it does today. The delivery charge, what we're calling the delivery charge, is equivalent to what is currently an energy charge in your current rate tariff. So that is really just a nomenclature change to better reflect to communicate better to customers what it is they're paying for. What is that charge for? And in this case, it's to get predominantly the wires and the fixed costs associated with getting the power to those customers. Then demand charge here again exists today and would continue to be called the demand charge. And that is unlike the energy charge, which is per kWh. The demand charge is per kW measured for those customers that are measured and metered for demand. The pass-throughs, I talked earlier about the transmission pass-through and the matrix. I made reference to the matrix. So every year, the PUC comes out with a new matrix. That's your opportunity to update this transmission charge to be reflective of whatever the new costs are that the PUC says you're going to be responsible for in that prospective year. So annually, we would expect that to get adjusted for all customers. And for customers that do have a demand charge and have a demand meter and are metered for that, we would suggest that the rate that you charge those customers is on a per kW basis, in a demand basis, because that best lines up with the reality of how that cost is being incurred. It's based upon contribution of the ERCOT 4CP, a demand measurement, so we're going to recover it from customers in a demand charge. For everybody else, they don't have demand meters. We don't have the option of charging them on a demand, so we would convert that cost into a dollars per kWh and charge it to customer classes accordingly. But for each customer class, there will be a different transmission charge pass-through because different customer classes are creating different levels of that cost. The next one listed is a community benefit charge, which is the third charge that I alluded to earlier in my presentation that we're proposing. This would be a uniform rate per kWh that would apply equally to all customer classes. And the purpose of this charge is to more transparently communicate to customers and recover from all customers the cost of some discounts that are inherent in the rate design. One of the discounts is for state higher education customer accounts. That is something that the state statute dictates must be provided for. So BPUB doesn't have a whole lot of flexibility in whether it does or doesn't offer that discount. So that discount is included as part of this recovery. But it also includes the recovery of what we're proposing to be a municipal discount. There are currently municipal rates that are lower than the otherwise applicable rate for different customer classes, but it's not a uniform standard discount across all base charges. So we would recommend that you adjust that so it's a similar to the state higher education accounts, it's a 20% off of base charges type format. The other thing that would be potentially recovered in the community benefit charge is discounts for churches. There's around $80,000 per year worth of discounts provided to churches that we've assumed would be recovered in this charge. And lastly, and the biggest contributor to this charge is BPUB self-use. So this is the electricity being used in this building, being used at the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant. BPUB's own use of electricity would be, the cost of that would be recovered in this charge. You could, in the future, also add other costs that you want to add to this for prospectively each year as you visit the budget. If you want to update this, you could add costs for other things like energy efficiency. If you wanted to fund energy efficiency at a certain dollar amount per year, you could have other programs that are not accounted for in the budget now, but you can programmatically say, well, we want to encourage energy efficiency. We'll put an energy efficiency budget in here and recover that cost transparently from customers so that there's a mechanism that already exists outside of base rates to take care of that. And you can move that up and down every year with the budget as you see fit.
So it wouldn't be itemized as a specific program, it would fall under the community benefit charge.
That's
proposed rate.
accurate. Yeah. So under the community benefit, it would be a single rate per kWh that applies to all customers, but it's not disaggregated and broken out between discounts or programs. You could open up the math and see the programs that are being funded there, so you could provide some transparency for those that want to see it. But on the bill, you would only just see a single line item for community benefit. That would be.
If we removed all of the discounts that we're including, that we're not required to have, do we have, without getting into details, kind of high level, we have an idea of what the community benefit charge would be?
Yes, and it's included in our slides for the showing kind of bill impacts. They assume that the current the current discounts continue and are funded through this community benefit charge. So those are quantified and captured in there. No supplemental funding for new programs is assumed in that number, but if you added them, we would just, the rate would go up.
Yeah, it's for us to
corresponding
consider in the
whatever.
future.
Yeah.
But I was just asking if we reduce it, if we reduce the current ones that were not required,
Yep.
would the total be reduced for the customer benefit?
Yes, so if you, let's just say for the discounts that are more discretionary from this board's perspective, like the churches
Sure.
or the municipal discounts, you do away with those, it reduces this community benefit charge rate will go down.
Okay.
Then the last thing, I've mentioned this before, but you currently have the FPEC. We're changing the nomenclature of that to say that that's the energy supply charge, to a little bit better communicate what it is that is being recovered there. It's also true that, and I don't know how well I've covered this already, so I'll take a brief moment to say, the current FPEC actually includes some fixed costs in it that don't vary by energy usage. For example, that net transmission cost that I was talking about earlier, so a piece of the transmission cost ends up in FPEC. Some fixed costs related to one of the generation plants ends up in FPEC. Those fixed costs, at least from our perspective, don't belong there. What also isn't in, and so those are some things that are in FPEC that we don't think should be there. There's also some things that we feel are missing from FPEC that we were suggesting would be included in the energy supply charge, primarily revenues from interactions in the wholesale market. You're selling that generation in the wholesale market, you're getting ancillary service revenues, you're getting wholesale revenues from the sale of that energy into the wholesale market. Those revenues are really tied back to the fuel that you're burning, for example, to create those revenue dollars back in. So the energy supply charge would have all of the variable costs associated with fuel and purchase power, none of the fixed charges that are there now, but also would be reduced by this offsetting revenue from the sale of energy into the wholesale market. Any questions about that structure?
Yeah, I guess, so in short, the fuel would have a lesser impact.
Yes, so exactly. I think that's a good way of saying it. And so we're prospectively moving some of those costs into base rates. I mentioned that around $10 million. We're moving $10 million into base rates. And so the costs that would be eligible for running through that energy supply charge are going to be decreased. And I actually have a slide on that illustrates that here in a moment as well. But talking about, just getting towards unity, again, I apologize for the number of numbers on this slide, but I'll kind of point you to the pieces that I think are most instructive for our conversation. This is really a summary of the very top, what are the base rate revenues currently, and what would they be under the proposed rates. The second set of numbers is the base revenue requirement for each year. Here again, if you look in year 3, that's approximately the midpoint of the average. So it's, the test year is based on the average of all 5 years. That's approximately where year 3 is. So 93.1 versus $93.3 million in base revenue requirement. And then at the line in the very middle of the slide just shows the over-under recovery and shows how close to zero we are in every year. So due to just administrative desire to not have odd numbers in the rate structure and rounding, there's never going to be a situation where you exactly hit the revenue requirement dollar for dollar in every year. But the idea is to, as best you can, manage that number, the over-under recovery in each year to be around zero. And so you'll see how close we are in a $90 million revenue requirement to achieving that. The next set of numbers really just talk to that $10 million I was referring to earlier. So it's showing that we're increasing the revenues from base revenues by around $10 million in the first year. And so if so that's a not insignificant increase in base revenues, but remember it's also being accompanied by reductions in the other parts of the bill. So it doesn't impact customers the same way that if it would if you weren't also making the other parts of the bill smaller. You'll note that, you know, the biggest change happens in phase one, and then there's some basically phasing in to year 3, and then the remainder of the years are really just keeping up with inflation year over year. And this is really just a graphical representation of the numbers that were on the prior slide. So you'll see the current is the blue bar. You know, your residential is around $6 million under recovered. Of the $10 million approximately you're under recovering. By year 3, the light blue bars, the far right of each customer class, are hardly visible in many of the slides because they're so close to cost of service, to unity, that they barely show up. So let's look at actual real rates. So this is the residential customer class showing the cost of service. The COS stands for cost of service. The current rate is under 2025, and then the proposed rates in each of the next 5 years are shown. You'll note that we are significantly increasing the customer charge for residential customers, and then we're eliminating the 2-tier variable rate structure. So currently, if you'll see under the 2025 current, you have 2 different volumetric rates depending on whether you're consuming more or less than, I believe it's 1,000 kWh. Pardon if I'm getting that wrong from my memory, I apologize. But no longer will there be a tier. Instead, it's going to be a single flat rate charged for all energy and the base rate. And then the next 3 components of the bill are the 3 pass-throughs that we were talking about. So the energy supply charge will adjust annually based on, you know, interactions with the market. The transmission charge will change annually based off the matrix. And the community benefit charge will change as needed to fund the discounts and any other programs that you might want to fund. So I did, Chairman Martinez mentioned, so this is the quantification of that, the impact of that discount. It's about 3 mils, so 0.003 dollars per kWh, at least in the first year, and grows modestly thereafter. And so we're going to get to bill impacts here in a moment, which I know will be instructive for you, but just to get through all the proposed rates. This is the commercial non-demand customer class. Again, remember because we're proposing to move the breakpoint from 50 kW to 25 kW, there's around 1/3 of the customers that are currently in this class of commercial non-demand, basically the biggest third, are going to move over into the commercial demand customer class. So the folks that are left in commercial non-demand, the smallest 2/3, are going to be charged these rates. Here again exhibits a meaningful increase in the customer charge, and then a flattening of the energy charge, which currently is called energy charge. We're calling it delivery charge prospectively. Again, there's 2 tiers currently. There would be 1 flat volumetric rate for that prospectively under our proposal. Again, you'll note the transmission rate is going to be different for each customer class, but the energy supply and the community benefit charges would be the same numbers for each class. Commercial demand charges. There's a lot more numbers on this slide, but it's because there's your current rate structure exhibits what we would refer to as a right rate structure, in which there's 4 different tiers of energy charges and 4 different tiers of demand charges that are applicable on the bill depending on how that customer is using energy. We're simplifying that substantially by going to a single delivery charge per kWh and a single demand charge per kW for these customers, meaningfully improving the fixed cost recovery by increasing the customer charge and generally increasing the demand charge, with the remainder of the revenue requirement, still base rate revenue requirement, continuing to be recovered through the energy charge. You'll note the cost of service doesn't have a delivery charge in it because the costs that we're talking about recovering are fixed charges. We just happen to, for rate design purposes, opt to recover some of these costs in a variable charge. So we're not eliminating the variable charge, but we are reducing it compared to what it's currently expected to recover. This should be welcome to those customers, and we'll see this in the bill impacts, customers that are high load factor, more efficient users of the system will prefer higher demand charges and lower energy charges or delivery charges. The last customer class we're proposing rates for is commercial large demand customers. Here again, simplifying the two-tiered structure into a single delivery charge, and there is currently only one demand charge for this customer. We're increasing the customer charge. These customers are so large they won't even notice, I don't believe, the change of the customer charge, to be honest. It's such a small portion of their overall bill. But the demand charge will send a strong signal to customers to use energy as efficiently as practical. So with that, unless there's anything we want to talk about before we get to bill impacts, I will preface the following slides with the comment about the current FPAC. I alluded to this earlier. The current FPAC, which at least I think 4 weeks ago is when I pulled this off your website, this was the current as of then, is artificially low. So we didn't want the artificially low FPAC in bill comparisons to skew the bill impacts. So we're predominantly looking at, for many of these slides, we're making the assumption that the current rates have an FPAC that's equal to a little bit over 7 cents. That's what the true cost of FPAC eligible cost would be in January of 2026 if there were no over recovery that you're trying to work down over time. So we do show both the current and that theoretical FPAC in some slides, but where both aren't shown, we usually have a note that lists what the assumption is with regard to the current FPAC.
So the current FPAC is about half of what it would have been if we're not.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's artificially low by about half. So this is a representation of a residential bill for 1,000 kWh. Here again, this is one of those slides where we've assumed the FPAC is around a little over 7 cents under the current bill column. You'll see the customer charge is a little less than $7 as it currently is. We're proposing to increase that to $12 under the proposed bill category. The energy charge is increased slightly and the name is changed to delivery charge under the proposed rates. The fuel and purchase power, or FPAC, that currently exists gets separated out into an energy supply charge, which is the true variable costs that are in there, and then a transmission charge, which is discrete and separate under the proposed rates. And then, as I mentioned, we're increasing base rates and we're decreasing the cost recovered in the FPAC. So you'll see there's a bill decrease that falls out of that fuel and purchase power category. And then we're adding community benefit as a new charge that doesn't exist today, but would under the proposed bill. And so if FPAC were set at its natural spot of fractionally over 7 cents, the bill would look almost the same under the proposed rates and the current rates for 1,000 kWh. So this really isn't about necessarily increasing the revenue to be generated by the utility. We're just moving the revenue recovery around so that the right costs are being recovered from the right customers. This is another representation of the same residential bill at 1,000 kWh. The primary difference we're showing here is we're showing the current rates with the FPEC at 7 cents and the FPEC at the current FPEC as it exists today, which is half of that. So you'll see there's a pretty meaningful difference in the bill depending on what the FPEC is. But if you look at the cost of service, in the kind of middle of the graph, compared to the rates we're proposing for 26, you'll see that we're close to the cost of service. We're not there yet. We'll get there in year 3 of our proposal, but we're moving towards cost of service. And importantly, at least for our purposes, the very bottom of the chart that has the fixed charges, the dark blue portion of the bar, we're making a pretty big stride towards the current less than $7 customer charge to $12 customer charge, which is better aligned with the cost of service.
Yeah, so basically the current versus the proposed is essentially the same totals that we just reviewed on the previous slide.
Yep. The two outside bars are the exact same bills that we were just looking at on the prior slide.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I'm sure at some point you're going to be presenting to the city commission, I assume, right? Or at some point we're going to be taking it.
Yes.
Yeah, the previous slide I think is a very good one to highlight and spend some time for them to understand. And I think that's going to give them the big message is, as you've said several times already, we're not increasing rates, we're not increasing the total amount of monies that we're getting. We're just realigning to make sure that we're charging the customers and rewarding the customers appropriately.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
And so this is, I believe, the last residential slide that we're showing bill impacts for. And this is really just showing on a dollar basis, and then to the right, a percentage basis, what are the bill impacts expected for residential customers. So this is actually representative of all the residential customer bills just charted out. And you'll see that for the vast majority of them are around a $0 bill impact, essentially. You do have some customers that see a $5 or $6 increase. Those are likely customers that are using the least amount of energy, and so therefore the increase in the customer charge is causing their bill to increase by $5 or so. But then in percentage terms, what I would characterize as relatively modest changes in bills for all, for the customers in the residential customer class as a whole based upon the proposed rates.
So the negative numbers are reduction?
Yeah, those are bill decreases. Mm-hmm. Now, they assume, as it's stated in the slide, the comparison is assuming the current FPEC is 7 cents. But if you make that assumption, the current FPEC is 7 cents, then this would be representative of the negative numbers are bill reductions.
Good.
So now looking at the other kind of similar picture represented in the charts for the other customer classes. Commercial non-demand, I kind of put the parenthetical that this is a smaller customer in this class. It's one we're assuming is going to use 1,000 kWh. You'll see that we have much better fixed cost recovery from these customers, but we're still shy of the overall cost of service column reflected there. And as expected, the proposed bill impact is somewhere between the current bill, depending on whether or not the FPEC is where it is currently, or if it's a more natural point of around 7 cents. I will note this is the one customer class where the cost of service is a little bit of a imperfect representation, because remember, we did the cost of service based upon the 50 kW breakpoint and the customers that are there today at this time. A third of them are moving out, and so this is kind of, we're showing a bill for the customers that remain behind here, but that cost of service bill, the cost of service column, I should say, is not a perfect alignment with the customers that are left in that class. This is a slightly larger commercial non-demand customer. I'm just showing it at 3,000 kWh. it's pretty much the same story in terms of fixed cost recovery as the smaller non-demand customer. And then here again, the totality of the commercial customers that will stay in non-demand. So the smaller 2/3 that stay in this class, here's what their bill impacts would look like. Here again, many bill reductions for many of these customers, although you do have a handful of them that see increases as much as $53. That's customers that basically use zero energy because the current customer charge is around $7 and we're increasing it and so to $60. And so that increase is basically just representative of the customer charge changing for those customers that are using essentially no power at all. And then it also shows a similar story on the percentage basis.
And for commercial non-demand, we use 1,000 kWh as a reference.
Well, this is every single customer. These charts show every customer using whatever they used in our reference year, which I think was 2024. I'm subject to check. I can't remember what year we were looking at. But so this is representative of every single customer that was in the 2/3 that was left behind in this class. This is their bill impacts. The prior slides were showing for 1,000 or 3,000 kWh for illustrative purposes. And then this is where it gets a little more fun, is customers that have demand charges. So this happens to be a commercial customer. The next 4 slides are all individual customers that we picked out to be representative of different characteristics of customers on your system. So this is one that has high load factor. So their load factor for this customer is around 66%. So they consume on average for a typical month around 82,000 kWh and put a 174 kW demand per month on average on the system. So they're a relatively efficient user of the system for customers in this customer class. And so you'll see our proposed bill, if you look at the base portion of it, which is the fixed and the variable, the dark blue and the orange bars on the very far right-hand side where the proposed rates are, you'll see that the addition of those 2 bars is fractionally above the dark blue bar of cost of service for this customer class. So their high load factor and their bill that we're sending to this customer under the proposed rates is marginally over cost of service for this very high load factor customer. And not too dissimilar, frankly, from the bill that they're receiving now in the grand scheme. If we look at, in the same customer class, a low load factor customer, so this is a customer with 20% load factor. They have a 90 kW demand on average per month and around 12,000 or 13,000 kWh. They're one of the less efficient users of your system because they place relatively high demands on the system but use relatively little energy. You'll see that for that customer, the cost of service is the big dark blue portion of the bar for cost of service, the fixed piece, is higher than the fixed and variable component pieces added together under the proposed rates. This is illustrative of a continued intra-class subsidy that will continue to exist in this class. So we are doing better to move customers generally closer to cost of service under the proposed rates, but we're not curing any kind of subsidy outright. To do that, you would need to set the rates exactly at cost of service, which would imply a substantial increase in the demand charge, which would be problematic for gradualism reasons. So this slightly subsidized low load factor customer is being paid for by this slightly overcharged high load factor customer, which we feel is an appropriate balance of the competing interests of all the customers in the class.
So 66% is a high load factor?
Yeah, for customers that are in the commercial demand, class, this is a relatively high load factor customer. You've got large commercial demand customer class that we'll talk about it earlier. You'll see some slightly higher load factor for those customers that are much larger, but in this group, this is relatively high load factor. So looking here again of the whole population of customers in the commercial demand, this is what the bill impacts would look like. Here again, these charts are assuming that the current FPAC is 7.3 cents, but it's predominantly bill decreases with minimal to any increase. Very few of the customers would see bill increases by comparison under these proposed rates. Now we get the last commercial class, large demand. These are the largest customers on your system. This is for a high load factor customer in that class, 74% load factor, so pretty meaningfully better than the last high load factor customer we were looking at, but it's also just a much bigger customer. And here again, you're going to see the same exact story. We are ever so slightly over-recovering from this very high load factor customer in this class in terms of the proposed rate base charges compared to the cost of service. And that is paying for the slight under-recovery from this low load factor customer that's in that same class. So the disparity is a lot smaller because there's these customers are a little bit more homogeneous. I can't say that. They're a little bit more the same because, first of all, there's very few of them that are all very large. But we're still continuing to have a slight intra-class subsidy because low load factor customers are going to be slightly below cost service and high slightly above. And then again, the bars are not as big or as numerous because there's just not that many customers here. This represents all of the customers in this class, their bill impacts. You do have a couple of customers that see bill increases under this proposal of a couple $1,000s. Those are the low load factor customers in the class seeing some increase in their bill. But in percentage terms, they're predominantly not, for a couple of them, it's a percentage increase that's meaningful, but for most of them, it's pretty de minimis. So you've been good enough to get through the whole presentation with me, so thank you very much for your attention. I guess, are there any other questions about the proposal or anything that I've suggested that you'd like to delve into?
Go ahead. I want to make sure that we give the correct direction for any open items. One, I think, is the community benefits charge. I don't know if we need to decide, I guess, what should be in there. Do you need direction for that?
Well, I guess what would be most helpful to me is if there are any changes to the assumptions with regard to the discounts that we've assumed for different customer groups. Primarily, you can't do much about the state institutions of higher education because that's codified in statute, but for everybody else, do you want to continue the existing discounts? And I'm saying continue the existing discounts. We've kind of changed the way the municipal discount would work because instead of having a municipal rate that's a dollar amount on the tariff, you would have a percentage discount on base rates just like you do for the state institutes of higher education. So, but in dollar terms, it's a pretty similar outcome. Do we keep those, and for the church accounts, do we keep those discounts in place? If so, our recommendation is to recover it through this community benefit charge as illustrated. But if your feedback is we want to revisit the amount of the discounts or the application of the discounts, then we can simply just reflect that in adjustments to that.
And would that change the total revenue?
It would make no difference to the base rate revenue recommendations. The nice thing about this is because it's more transparent, but it's also a lot cleaner because instead of having to redesign base rates around changes in the discount, you now have a mechanism that discount flows through in a separate pass-through, so it can go up or down depending on how you want to structure that program.
I guess the three categories are churches,
Churches,
the government, so the city, I guess specifically,
yeah.
and then BPUB.
Yeah, so the biggest, that's right, and the biggest contributor of those three is BPUB self-use.
Do you guys have any preference for that? Any concerns, leaving it the same?
No, I mean, I think that the discount for the city, I mean, it's really going to be pretty much neutral for them, right? I mean, the percentage we're going to set is going to match their current discount, so they're not going to really see any impact. And then the amount for the churches, with total discount
It's
for the year?
$80-something thousand per year, so it's not no, in total for the whole church discount program.
all the churches,
All the
for the whole
church,
community.
for everybody that has the benefit of that discount, which
Yeah.
I will be honest, I didn't audit to make sure every
No, but that's
church
what I
has
understand
that
too.
discount. But for all of them that are getting the discount, it amounts to around $80,000 per year.
Which is, I mean, really, $80,000 is a lot of money, but for the whole year for that class, compared to other classes, it's not significant at all.
It is not a big contributor to the dollar amount that we're showing in
it's
that,
like
community
Probably
benefit
like,
pass-through.
How many PUB customers do we have? I mean, huh? 52,000.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, it may be rounding. That particular discount may be, rounding in the grand scheme of things. Remember, we're doing it on an energy basis, so it's, we're down to 3.003 cents, per kWh.
Are these for all churches in Brownsville? Or
Yeah,
just
they're
all of them?
PUB,
All of them.
PUB
Customer-
customers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So it's like 12 cents a
Um,
month or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound like there's too much sway one way or another. I think the great thing is that we'll be able to ask these questions in the future. As you said, we will do another cost of service at some point in the future. And I think we can revisit there, see where we are, see if that has changed, As far as the monies that's transferred to the city, is there any impact with the current proposal?
It's not a large impact because we're kind of trading off things where we would have, if all else equal, it would either go up or down because of the changes to FPEC, but we're kind of balancing it out. So net, it's not a big difference in the change in the way, in the gross amount of the general fund transfer.
Sure, good.
So it's kind of neutral.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. If it wasn't neutral, I'm sure we can have those discussions, but that's even better.
Yeah.
Right? As far as you mentioned also energy efficiency programs, is that something we need to decide now, or?
I would refer that, question to the,
So if you adopt the community benefits charge, say at budget time or next year, if you wanted to fund a energy efficiency program, you can instruct us to add that. It becomes a pass-through, and we can adjust it any time in the future. What we're really talking about now is any changes to base rates.
Okay,
So the demand charge, the delivery charge, and the customer service charge, those are the ones that are really, that we're going to change, and they're going to stick for 5 years.
okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Very good job.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, very thorough, and
yeah.
is this was just a workshop, right?
Yes, and I just want to say thank you for you all, and I know for some of you, you've sat multiple times, and the Freight Task Force at the Finance Committee, and for you, this is the first time you've seen, or the second workshop, and I appreciate here. At any given time, we will be happy to sit down and go through any of the slides over. We know that some of your colleagues are not here, and we plan to reach out to them so that way they can be informed on some of the things. So I want to just point of clarification for the general fund transfer, everything is weather driven. So
Yes, of course.
that's where I think that we would have to, when we do sit down with our commissioners, all of this is weather driven, and all of it is also energy market driven.
Yes, yeah. So there's external factors
Loud and clear.
that are out of our control. I think the question was more from the structural perspective. And lastly, I know I changed the order of the agenda, and you have some travel
Yeah, no
after the
problem.
meeting, so I appreciate your patience and thank you for going through all the details. Obviously, this is very important for us to understand. That way we can make a recommendation to the commission at some point, and hopefully it'll be just as clear to them as it is for us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I
Thank you
really
very much
appreciate
for
it.
your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so based on all the X's and O's I have here, I think we are going to go to item G, number 1, General Manager's Report.
I will be quick. I will only go through the calendars on the general manager report. We have a couple of holidays coming in, so the awareness of the public is that we have on March 31st, our offices will be closed for Cesar Chavez Day, April 3rd, Good Friday, and May 25th, Memorial Day. With that, you have the schedule on your packet. If you have any questions, if you have any travel arrangements we need to do, we'll get you on the next agenda for any of the intended travel that is on there. I also want to announce that on SRWA, we have 2 new board members, and in your packet, you have the information, and that is Andrew Gonzalez for the City of Los Fresnos, and so he was sworn in on March 2nd, replacing Ms. Gabriela Fernandez. And we also have a new board member for Valley Mud, number 2 from Rancho Viejo, and that is Mr. Pat Pace, and he was also sworn in on March the 2nd. I also included in there the APPA legislative rally, the meetings that we attended in addition to the program. And if you have any other questions on any of the meetings or presentations, or please, reach out to me. Overall, it was a very successful meeting with the various different members. And that concludes the general manager report and update.
Okay, G2, there was no actions pulled out of consent. We already, we decided to pass on item 3 and covered item 4 and 5. So moving on to item H, unless I missed something, recess to close meeting. Do I have a motion to go into closed?
Motion?
A second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
If we can just read the items for closed.
Oh,
I
yes,
can-
sorry.
I can do that if you need me to. Yeah.
Sure.
So at this time on the items on the agenda designated for closed meeting will be considered. If there is an approved motion to go into closed meeting, the listers will be placed on hold until the board returns to open meeting. Item 1 for closed session, meeting with board's legal counsel for advice about contemplated and pending court and administrative litigation and on matters in which the duty of the attorney under the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct conflicts with Chapter 551. This is pursuant to Section 551071, and this is including but not limited to any item moved to closed session and the following. A, reports of local counsel and special counsel, including regarding potential or pending litigation involving BPUB, and B, city BPUB MOU-related matters. And then item 2 for closed is presentation, discussion, and possible recommendation of information upon pricing of purchase power, generation, and fuel, and their impact upon the fuel purchase, energy, and marketing charge pursuant to sections 551086 and section 551.072, the government code. Is there a motion to go into closed this time?
Do we have a motion to go into
Motion.
closed? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. All right, so the time is 8:40. We have completed the closed meeting, and we're moving to item I, consideration and action on closed meeting items. Number one, consideration and possible action on items discussed in closed meeting.
Right.
One.
No action taken during executive. The only action items under Section 1A, report of local and special counsel, including regarding potential and pending litigation involving BPUB. Is there a motion to proceed as discussed in executive?
Motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item J, consideration and action for future agenda items. Is there anything you guys would like to add for future agenda items at the moment?
No.
If not, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.